What if you were not yet 30 years old, and the greatest empire the world had ever seen was within your reach, not in theory, not in legend, but in reality? Would you stop? Would you rule what you already had? Or would you keep moving forward, even if it meant endless war, endless blood, and endless ambition? Alexander of Macedon was faced with that exact choice, and instead of slowing down, he chose to conquer everything. In just over a decade, he would defeat the most powerful empire on earth, march farther than any Greek army before him, and win every major battle he ever fought. But power has a cost, and Alexander would discover it before he ever reached 33. This is not just the story of a conqueror. It is the story of Alexander the Great. Alexander was born in 356 BC in the kingdom of Macedon, on the northern edge of the Greek world. From the beginning, his life was surrounded by legend. His mother, Olympias, claimed that Alexander was the son of Zeus himself. Whether myth or manipulation, this belief shaped Alexander's mind. He did not see himself as ordinary. He believed he was destined for greatness. But destiny alone is never enough. It must be shaped. And Alexander was about to be shaped. Alexander was trained for two paths. One was war. The other was thought. From an early age, Alexander was taught how to fight, how to ride, and how to command men older than himself. But his education did not stop at the battlefield. His tutor was Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers in human history. Under Aristotle, Alexander studied science, politics, medicine, and geography. He learned how societies were organized, how power was maintained, and how cultures differed from one another. This education would later shape the way Alexander ruled conquered lands, not just as a destroyer, but as a ruler who absorbed what he conquered. Yet, knowledge alone was not what drove him. Alexander was obsessed with heroes. Above all, Achilles. He slept with a copy of Homer's Iliad beneath his pillow and carried it with him on campaign. Achilles was not remembered for living long. He was remembered for living gloriously. Alexander embraced that idea completely. He did not dream of a peaceful reign. He dreamed of a legendary life. Even as a young man, he believed that greatness was not inherited. It was taken. And Alexander was already preparing to take it. Knowledge prepares the mind, but power is earned in blood. And Alexander was about to wear a crown. In 336 BC, Alexander's father, King Philip II, was assassinated. At just 20 years old, Alexander became king. Many believed he was too young, too reckless, too inexperienced. They were wrong. Alexander moved quickly and without mercy. Rivals were eliminated. Rebellions were crushed. When the city of Thebes rebelled, Alexander destroyed it completely. The message was clear. This was no boy king. Alexander had secured his throne. But ruling Macedon was not his ambition. He wanted the world. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed into Asia. This was not a raid. It was an invasion. His target was the Persian Empire, the greatest superpower the ancient world had ever known. Persia was rich, vast, and confident. Many believed Alexander's campaign would end the moment it truly began. They were wrong. At the river Granicus, Alexander faced his first major test, Persian commanders waited on the far bank, confident that the river itself would stop him. Against the advice of his generals, Alexander attacked immediately. He did not wait. He did not hesitate. He led the charge himself. As Macedonian cavalry struggled through the water, arrows and javelins rained down upon them. Alexander was struck, his helmet shattered. For a moment, the future of the campaign hung on a single breath. Only the intervention of one of his companions saved his life. The Persians broke, and Asia Minor lay open. But Alexander did not slow down. Soon after, he faced the Persian king himself, Darius III, at the Battle of Issus. Alexander was outnumbered. The battlefield was narrow, mountains on one side, the sea on the other. Alexander used this to his advantage. Instead of fighting the Persian army, he charged straight toward its heart, toward the king. When Darius saw Alexander approaching, he fled. For the first time, the King of Kings abandoned the battlefield. The psychological impact was devastating, but the war was not over. 2 years later, the two armies met again at Gaugamela. This time, Darius chose open ground, hoping numbers would finally bring victory. Alexander was outnumbered once more, but he had learned. He maneuvered his army to create a gap, a weakness, and when the moment came, he struck. Once again, Darius fled. With that, the Persian Empire collapsed. What had once seemed impossible was now reality. Alexander had defeated the greatest empire on earth, and he was only 25 years old. Victory followed victory, and with each one, Alexander's ambition grew. Soon, conquest was no longer enough. After defeating Persia's armies, Alexander no longer fought for survival. He fought as a ruler of the world. City after city fell before him. Some surrendered immediately, others resisted. The most defiant was Tyre, an island fortress, protected by the sea and by its own confidence. Instead of abandoning the siege, Alexander did something unthinkable. He ordered the construction of a road, a causeway, built stone by stone into the sea itself. For 7 months, the siege dragged on. When Tyre finally fell, it was destroyed completely. The message was unmistakable. No city was beyond his reach. From there, Alexander marched south into Egypt. Unlike the Persians before him, he was welcomed. The Egyptian priests declared him Pharaoh, a living god on earth. Alexander accepted the title, and with it, a new image of himself began to form. In the desert of Siwa, an oracle greeted him as the son of Zeus. Whether Alexander believed it or not, the idea stayed with him. He founded a new city at the mouth of the Nile, Alexandria, a symbol not just of conquest, but of permanence. By now, Alexander ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen, but power was changing him. He began to adopt Persian customs, Persian dress, Persian court rituals. To Alexander, this was unity. To his Macedonian soldiers, it felt like betrayal. The distance between king and army was growing, and Alexander did not notice, or chose not to care. Victory had given him everything except restraint. Alexander had conquered more land than any man before him. But even legends have limits, and his army had reached theirs. Alexander continued east, far beyond the borders of the Persian world, into lands his soldiers had never heard of, into climates they were not prepared for. The campaign no longer felt like conquest. It felt endless. Years had passed. Many of his men had not seen their homes in almost a decade. They were exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally, in India. Alexander faced enemies unlike any before. War elephants, towering over infantry, crushing men beneath their weight. Victory was achieved, but at a terrible cost. For the first time, Alexander's army said no. At the river Hyphasis, his soldiers refused to march any further. They had reached their limit. Alexander was furious. He isolated himself, refusing food, refusing sleep. But even a king who ruled the world could not force men to fight forever. For the first time in his life, Alexander turned back. The return was worse than the advance, crossing deserts under relentless heat. Thousands died from thirst, from hunger, from exhaustion. The army that had conquered the world was slowly being destroyed by it. Alexander himself was no longer the same. He grew harsher, more suspicious, more distant. Friends were executed, officers punished, trust eroded. The line between king and God was beginning to blur, and the cost was paid by everyone around him. The journey back was slow, painful, and it would be Alexander's last. In 323 BC, Alexander returned to Babylon. The city was meant to be a new capital, a center of a world empire, but Alexander would never rule from it. After years of relentless campaigning, his body finally began to fail. He fell ill suddenly with a high fever, growing weaker day by day. His generals gathered around his bed, waiting for orders, waiting for a successor. But Alexander gave none. When asked who should inherit his empire, he is said to have whispered, "To the strongest." Soon after, Alexander died. He was only 32 years old. He had never lost a major battle. He had conquered more land than any man before him. And yet, he could not conquer time. Without Alexander, the empire he built began to fracture. His generals turned against one another, dividing the world he had conquered. His wife Roxana and his son were murdered, his bloodline erased. But his legacy survived. Alexander had reshaped the ancient world. Greek language, Greek culture, and Greek ideas spread from the Mediterranean to Egypt, to Persia, to the edges of India. A new era had begun, the Hellenistic age. Alexander did not rule for long, but his shadow would stretch across centuries. Alexander conquered the world, but in the end, the world outlived him. So here is the question. If you were given unlimited power, unlimited ambition, and no clear limits, would you know when to stop? History is filled with men who tried and few who succeeded. If you enjoyed the story and the format, please like and subscribe. More stories are coming.